Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams remotely. He's out of town right now and by Zoom. Welcome to the program, Daniel.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Good. We have a few things to discuss. Of course, we can't go by without talking about either coronavirus or the so-called election that occurred and what's the status. So I'm going to start off with that. But then after that, we want to talk about what to expect from the foreign policy so far of the people that look like they're going to be appointed by Biden. And unfortunately, I don't have any good news on those appointees, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But first thing is, I'm looking for that one thing that we can say, hey, this is not too bad. And we've quoted this judge before, this Supreme Court just in the United Kingdom. But he did not mince words. He is sick and tired of what's going on with this COVID lockdown. The headline on this in Drudge was UK Supreme Court judge slams totalitarian COVID control freaks in government. It's a short, brief article, but he's one of the few that's speaking out. I don't know, social media might have to boycott him. They might not let him tweet anymore on Twitter. So anyway, that's good. Here now and then we do hear that, and hopefully we'll find a few more people like that.
Yeah, and as certainly Europe, excuse me, and the UK are facing another lockdown. The real question is, if the lockdowns worked the first time, why are we doing them again?
Right.
And the other question is, if the lockdowns didn't work the first time, why are we doing them again? So it's always the same question. Why are we doing them again if they worked and if they didn't work? And that's one question, of course, they won't answer.
Right. Okay, now on the foreign policy, and you've spent a lot of time studying foreign policy and being involved, and I just asked you a few minutes ago, where exactly were you during the bombing of Yugoslavia? And you said pretty close. You were over there, and you were working on honest elections. And I've never asked you this in private or on the air, but I wonder how their elections compared to our elections. But you were the monitors back then, so but right now we've had a problem with monitoring, and I think that's going to linger. And I just saw that because the audience at Fox is sort of lukewarm on even suggesting that there could be some fraud, they lost half of their audience. That's a little hard for me to believe that it happens that quickly. But people don't waste much time once they are made unhappy. Look at what's happened to Drudge. That doesn't mean that those people speaking out are absolutely right, but it does mean a lot of people are unhappy with the way things go publicly, and fortunately people still have the way to express themselves. It's sort of like going to the beach. They might not be able to get to court and fight their battle and win a constitutional fight in the Supreme Court, but at least they can go to the beach, and that can override, and those images of that are pretty good.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And yeah, I was overseas at the time. In fact, ironically enough, I was living in Hungary when the person we're going to talk about in a few minutes, Anthony Blinken, when his father, Donald Blinken, was President Clinton's ambassador in Hungary. And this is the era, of course, where Hungary was joining NATO and was hosting foreign troops on its soil not long after it finally got rid of foreign troops, Soviet troops off of its soil. It clicked over and got U.S. troops on its soil. So there's a long history of the Blinken family being involved in expanding the U.S. empire.
We were both involved. We didn't know each other at the time, but I was in Congress at that time, and I was doing my usual thing, voting no on that type of spending and trying to say, this doesn't make any sense. I was actually pleasantly surprised that it didn't expand and really get totally out of control because of the nature of that area of the world. But that doesn't mean there's calm and quiet over there. And I guess with what's coming in by the Biden administration, I don't think we can expect more peace and prosperity around the world any place, because his team is not looking toward a non-interventionist foreign policy. And I find it a little bit ironic. Just 2 days ago was the anniversary of the time JFK was murdered, assassinated. A coup occurred. we got a new president, and that's 50 some years ago, 1963, and he that happened. And here, I believe it's conceivable. I don't laugh at people that say, this political game and this election and the way these votes are counted, there's so many questions asked. A lot of times you get bits and pieces of information that raises more questions than answers, and that's the way I sort of feel about this. But for people to say, oh yeah, no problem there, just another good old honest American election, so everything is just fine.
Yeah, it definitely, that's the case. And looking ahead to this next administration, if Biden is successful, well, actually, you asked me earlier about being an election monitor, and I would say if I was monitoring the U.S. elections the way they were carried out, it would be the worst elections I've ever seen anywhere. And it doesn't matter if there's not evidence of widespread cheating; the entire process is completely broken. And you have half the country who believes they've been disenfranchised. So it's a huge problem. But, looking ahead, Dr. Paul, into what a Biden administration might look like, here's kind of an interesting clue. And it was presented as a brouhaha this morning because Jim Mattis, who was President Trump's in the Trump administration before he quit last year, or the end of 2018, he put an article in Foreign Affairs, which is the CFR journal, where he's basically, I think, sucking up to Biden. Even though Mattis himself was fired by Obama, he's sucking up to Biden. Here's what he wrote, Dr. Paul. He said, "We hope Biden will quickly refuse the national security strategy and eliminate America first from its content, restoring in its place the commitment to cooperative security that has served the U.S. so well for decades." Of course, we know that he quit the Trump administration because Trump wanted to pull out of Syria. But, the thing that got me, Dr. Paul, is this idea that this served us so well for decades. What is he talking about? Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. It's been a constant stream of wars. Who is this we that this kind of interventionist foreign policy has served so well for years?
Well, for many years, and it continues to be agreed to, that Democrats are supposed to be better for non-intervention zones overseas. They're the ones who, fought to finally end the Vietnam War. But boy, when you study all that, I mean, even the Vietnam War was, orchestrated by a Democratic administration. But it isn't so much the partisan that gets us into these big trouble. It's interventionism, and they're basically all intervention, but they vary. But if you try to compare and get some numbers to the difference between Clinton and Obama with Trump, you'd have to say, Trump did better from our viewpoint. Yes, he's made some noises, and we don't like all that, trade barriers and things. But he certainly didn't get. He did more to try to calm some of those places down. We really wanted some of these troops to come home. But compared to what? If you compare it to Clinton, and if you compare it to Obama, Obama's the one. So the first thing they do with Obama, the insiders, the deep state, the people who love these wars, what do? Before he even is in office, they give him the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, what kind of ridiculous nonsense is that? So it's always image building, but I still think a lot of people think that if you just look at it, that, well, the way Trump talks, he's tough, he loves the generals and this sort of thing. But one thing I can say now, I think he loves the generals a lot less today than he did 4 years ago.
Yeah, the Trump administration is a real tragedy. It probably go down, at least in our history books, our personal history books, as what might have been. But it was mistake after mistake. Why hire Madison in the first place? Why hire Bolton in the first place? Why have Elliott Abrams come in the first place? There just wasn't enough attention paid by Trump to bringing in. I was rewatching an old speech that Colonel McGregor did at an RPI conference last year, and he made the great point that we've made before: the personnel is the policy. And the one thing that we'll remember from the Trump administration is how horrible he was at picking personnel. And then when he had personnel in place who not only disagreed with him, but actively worked against him. Look at James Jeffrey. his envoy for Syria, who bragged last week, hey, I lied to the president the whole time. I told him we had far less troops than we actually had. Aha, aren't I funny? When you have these kinds of people serving your administration, it really is a wonder that he was able to achieve what he was in terms of forestalling Washington's addiction to war, Washington pushing him to even attack even Iran, who Trump is so wrong about, even Iran, when he had a clear-cut justification in the minds of the neocons to attack, he didn't do it. So really, it's a miracle that he didn't do any wars, considering the people he brought in.
You know, Robert Taft, after World War II, when they were setting up the NATO, he was opposed to that. And that was a clear-cut principle that he took. So even now, our side of the argument, which are in office and sort of trying to oppose the people like Biden and others, it's not as clear cut as that. It's like, don't even get in. But they really come down, you know, hard on Trump for saying, I mean, it's almost explicit, the people who've heard that they were annoyed because he didn't want to, you know, expand NATO, you know, because there was, what are they supposed to do? And there was a big question, and we still don't know what they're supposed to do. Don't you know, they're supposed to start a war for us, you know, for the war profiteers. And if they don't do that, then they don't like their president. So in some ways, when I think about the 60s and the JFK and Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, when they were lives were taken, foreign policy was always a big issue. And when you think of the determination of what's gone on in these last 6-8 years, you know, since 16 in the campaign, and Trump be trying to prevent his election, and then trying to get him impeached, and trying to convict him of crimes, that this was done to get rid of him, you know, in a different way. They've chose different ways, but their determination, for some reason, I see that as somewhat similar to what was going on in the 60s, or what goes on for a long time. It's been known that we've had a financial interest in wars for a long time, all the way back most of the 20th century.
And, you know, Trump was an outsider. He was in that way sort of like Nixon, who was hated by the establishment because he was from California, not from the East Coast at the time. And they have worked against him. In fact, the very same people that Biden will be bringing in are people that were actively working, I would say, to foment a coup against Trump from the very beginning. Jake Sullivan is expected to be Biden's national security advisor. This guy is a rabid Russia hoax conspiracy theorist. In fact, not only was he pushing that fake dossier, the fake Steele dossier, not only was he pushing the fake Russiagate hoax the entire time, he was actually involved with Hillary Clinton from the beginning, cooking the whole thing up. He may have had his fingers in the pie while it was being prepared, this entire hoax. So these people were actively involved in a coup, and now they find themselves ascending to power, and they are going to bring out the long knives. They are hungry for revenge, and they're gonna give it to America good and hard, I think.
Yeah, and I was trying to express a minute ago the frustration where even our side rarely, except for the several libertarians that are interested, to be more precise about what foreign policy should be. Yes, they want different management, and I think it always comes up short, and then it's just the individual, it's the management. Well, let's back off here, we shouldn't do this, but they never want to give up the empire, and that's what it's all about. And it just happens that the deep state is very much involved in protecting the American empire, but that too is limited. Empires don't last forever, and there is always a cost. It does take a long time to get the people riled up. Certainly they got riled up by the late 1960s and early 1970s. And it wasn't by the professors coming out of the universities explaining to their students and to other professors that this is an unwise policy. It was the people that were sick and tired of the carnage that was going on and the waste of the 1960s and the number of people that have died. So that's why I think one of our responsibilities, Daniel, is to make sure that the preciseness of understanding what a non-interventionist foreign policy is all about, and once people understand it, I think they sort of say, oh, that's what it is. We thought it was isolationism. We thought you didn't want to do anything with the world. And yet when they wake up, oh no, what we're talking about is more peace in the world and more prosperity in the world and less lockdowns for our own citizens. What happens when this mentality, the militaristic mentality, the international ideas are applied to people here at home? And that is what is happening now. Now we're talking about the argument: what do they have the right to look in our windows and march in our house on Thanksgiving and saying, "Oh, you got 12 people there, you're only allowed to have 10"? And the complacency of so many people bothers me, but I'm also encouraged by the number of people and the occasional judge that will come through and rule correctly and say, this is totally unnecessary. And I'm convinced that as time goes on, they're going to find out the many things that we have talked about on this program and cited scientists who do take a different position on all this nonsense. So we need a little scientific, statistical proof of the values of a non-interventionist foreign policy.
You know, I'm attending some family business out here, so I've been away, and one of the things I've done, Dr. Paul, the last couple of days is look back at some of the speeches that we had at our conferences, at the Ron Paul Institute conferences. And I don't want to turn this into a plug to the Ron Paul Institute, but I really do think this coming era, if there is indeed a Biden era, will make our work more critical than ever, getting the word out, defining what non-interventionism is and the need for doing it. I think it's as disturbed as I am by what I see coming in with the Biden administration, I'm also encouraged that this will be our opportunity to make the case for non-interventionism.
Well, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
We're going to go ahead and finish up, but I wanted to just get your opinion of any more anticipation of what might end up in the administration, and whether or not where's some light to be seen. We don't usually see it with an administration like this, and so far I would have to say things don't look all that good for us.
No, I don't see very much light, at least in foreign policy. The thing is that the team that's going in with Biden are a team of deceivers and liars. They lied about Yugoslavia, they lied about Syria, they lied about Libya, overtly lied. Blinken was involved personally in bringing jihadists into Bosnia to foment a war there. He was involved personally in bringing jihadists into Syria to destroy that country. He is rabidly anti-Russia. He even said Trump took the word of Putin over his intelligence community. And he also said this quote, Dr. Paul, this is something people should wake up and listen to. He said, President Biden will be in the business of confronting Putin. That sounds great. Let's have a war with Russia. Great job, guys. So, no, I'm afraid I usually try to find a silver lining, but right now it's an awfully dark cloud.
Very good. And I think I'm going to go ahead and close, Daniel, if you have another point to make right now or not.
I think go ahead, Dr.
Oh,
Paul.
okay. No, I'm going to close. I want to thank our audience for tuning in today, because Daniel's been called out of town. He's in the West Coast. I hope he doesn't stay, but I can assure you, I don't think he wants to stay out there. He's looking to get back in the fold here in Texas. But we're going to continue to follow what's going on, and I think there's a lot of activity, whether it has to do with the coronavirus itself, whether it has to do with the lockdown that's probably coming, and what the reaction is going to be, and what will the final conclusion be, because we have not seen the final conclusion, although there has been an acceptance that this is all over as far as the count goes. But I don't want them to quit counting. I want them to, if they have these many thousands of questionable votes, the person in the White House is important, but it's sort of secondary for me to point out that you can't trust these elections. And people say, well, that's horrible, that's horrible. No, I think people should be more cautious about it, because the dependency of showing knowing that the election is golden, even if you had no fraud whatsoever. All you have to do is have the special interests influence the gang of voters out there to go in there, and the money to move elections would still be there. So that would be the big thing. That'll be coming right along, and we're going to continue to talk about non-intervention here at home in our personal lives, and non-intervention overseas to mind our own business. If we care, that's what we should do to achieve our peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.